The studio lights dimmed as James Dean walked into that unmarked room on October 29, 1955. Nobody knew this meeting would expose Hollywood's darkest secret and change everything we thought we knew about the rebel icon forever. It was 3 a.m. when the phone rang in James Dean's cramped apartment. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, yet strangely authoritative. "Mr. Dean, there are things about your career you need to know. Meet me at Paramount's abandoned Stage 9 tomorrow at midnight. Come alone and tell no one." The line went dead before Dean could ask any questions. Dean stared at the receiver, his hands trembling slightly. Stage 9 had been closed for renovations for months. Why would anyone want to meet there? But something in the caller's tone made it impossible to ignore. There was an urgency, almost a warning hidden beneath the formal words. The next evening, Dean found himself standing before the darkened stage, his heart pounding with an intensity he usually reserved for his most challenging scenes. The heavy door creaked open at his touch, revealing nothing but shadows and the faint smell of old cigarettes and forgotten dreams. But as he stepped inside, a single lamp illuminated a figure sitting calmly in the center of the vast, empty space. The man was older, perhaps in his 60s, wearing an expensive suit that seemed oddly out of place in the dusty, abandoned stage. His eyes held secrets that seemed to span decades of Hollywood history. "Thank you for coming, James. My name is Victor Castellano, and I've been watching your career very closely." Dean felt a chill run down his spine. He'd never heard that name before, yet something about the man's presence commanded immediate respect and caution. "What do you want from me?" Dean asked, his voice barely above a whisper. But what Castellano revealed next would shatter everything Dean thought he knew about his rise to stardom. "Sit down, James," Castellano said, gesturing to a chair that seemed to appear from nowhere. "What I'm about to tell you will change how you see everything. Your career, your contracts, even your recent success." Dean remained standing, his defiance showing even in this moment of uncertainty. "I don't have time for games. If you have something to say, say it." A thin smile crossed Castellano's weathered face. "Your breakout role in East of Eden, do you really think it was your audition that got you that part? Your magnetic screen test that convinced Kazan?" He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in. "Or perhaps you believe your performance in Rebel Without a Cause was purely your own creation?" Dean's jaw tightened. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything, son. I'm telling you that every major role, every breakthrough moment in your career has been carefully orchestrated by a group of people you've never met. People who saw your potential long before you even knew you wanted to act." The blood drained from Dean's face. "That's impossible. I worked for everything I have, every audition, every rejection, every small part that led to this moment was guided," Castellano interrupted smoothly. "The casting directors who discovered you, the agents who fought for you, even the directors who insisted on using an unknown actor instead of established stars, they were all following very specific instructions." Dean felt the room spinning around him. "Instructions from whom?" Castellano reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "From us, James. From an organization that has been shaping Hollywood careers for over 2 decades. And now it's time you knew why we chose you." But as Dean reached for the envelope, footsteps echoed from somewhere deep in the shadows of the stage, and both men froze. The footsteps grew closer, deliberate and measured. Dean's instincts screamed at him to run, but Castellano remained eerily calm, as if he'd been expecting this interruption all along. "Don't be afraid, James," Castellano said quietly. "These are colleagues of mine. They've been waiting to meet you for a very long time." 3 figures emerged from the darkness. 2 men and a woman, all dressed in dark, expensive clothing that seemed to absorb the lamplight. Their faces were serious, almost reverent as they looked at Dean. The woman stepped forward first. "Mr. Dean, I'm Patricia Rothschild. I've been documenting your progress since you were 17 years old." She opened a briefcase filled with photographs, pictures of Dean at drama school, at his first auditions, even casual shots of him walking down the street. "We've been preparing for this moment for years." Dean's hands shook as he looked through the photos. Some were taken from distances that suggested professional surveillance. Others were so intimate, so personal, that they could only have been taken by someone very close to him. "How did you get these? Why were you watching me?" The second man, younger but with prematurely grey hair, spoke up. "Because you're not just an actor, James. You're a symbol, a representation of something this generation desperately needs: authentic rebellion, genuine emotion, the courage to be vulnerable in a world that demands conformity. But symbols need to be carefully crafted," the third man added. "Your image, your roles, even your personal relationships have been subtly influenced to create the perfect embodiment of modern youth." Dean felt sick. "Are you saying my entire life is fake? That nothing I've done has been real?" "On the contrary," Castellano interjected. "Everything you've done has been completely real. Your talent, your passion, your intensity. Those can't be manufactured. We simply ensured that the right opportunities found you at the right moments. Patricia opened another folder. Every script that came to you was first reviewed by our cultural analysts. Every role was chosen not just for your career, but for the impact it would have on American youth. You've become exactly what we hoped you would become, a voice for a generation that was losing its way. But then she pulled out one final document, and her expression grew somber. However, there's something else you need to know, something that changes everything. The document Patricia handed to Dean was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Official letterhead from studios he'd never heard of, signatures from executives whose names weren't familiar, and at the bottom, a date that made his blood run cold, October 30th, 1955. Tomorrow. What is this? Dean asked, his voice barely audible. It's your next contract, Castellano said softly. The role that will cement your legacy forever. But James, this isn't just about acting anymore. This is about becoming a legend. Dean scanned the pages, his eyes widening with each paragraph. The contract wasn't for a movie. It was for something much more complex and terrifying. This says you want me to disappear, to stage my own death, and become someone else entirely. Think about it, James, the younger man said earnestly. James Dean, the actor, will always be limited by his humanity, by aging, by the inevitable decline that comes to all performers. But James Dean the legend, James Dean the eternal symbol of youth and rebellion, that can live forever. You're insane, Dean whispered, backing away from the group. You want me to give up my life, my identity, everything I am, just to become some kind of myth? Not give up, Patricia corrected. Transform. You'd live comfortably, anonymously, knowing that your image continues to inspire millions of young people who need to believe that someone like them can matter, can make a difference. Castellano stood up slowly. We've created the perfect conditions for your legend, James. The rebellious roles, the method acting approach, the mysterious persona. It's all been building to this moment. One car accident, one tragic ending to a brilliant career, and you become immortal. Dean's mind raced. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd believed about his career, his talent, his future, it had all been manipulated. But even more terrifying was the realization that part of him was actually considering their offer. What if I refuse? He asked. The room fell silent. The weight of that question hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished cigarette. And then Castellano spoke the words that would haunt Dean forever. If you refuse, James, then tomorrow will unfold exactly as it was always meant to, Castellano said, his voice carrying a sadness that seemed to come from deep experience. You'll drive to Salinas for that racing event, just as you planned, but accidents happen on those winding roads, especially when someone is distracted, conflicted, carrying the weight of impossible knowledge. Dean felt the world tilt around him. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a choice, Castellano replied. Accept our proposal, and you control your own transformation into legend. Refuse, and fate will take its course. But either way, James Dean, as the world knows him, ends tomorrow. The woman, Patricia, stepped forward with tears in her eyes. We've grown to care about you, James. Watching you, documenting your journey. You're more than just a project to us now. We're hoping you'll choose life, even if it means leaving your identity behind. Dean looked around at these people who had apparently controlled every aspect of his career, and suddenly understood something that chilled him to the bone. You've done this before, haven't you? Other actors, other legends who died young. The silence was his answer. How many? He whispered. Enough to know that some stories are more powerful than the people who live them, the younger man said quietly. But you're the first one we've ever offered the choice to. Usually we simply let destiny take its course. Dean walked to the window of the abandoned stage, looking out at the Los Angeles lights that had once seemed so full of promise. Now they looked like the lights of a carnival, bright, distracting, but ultimately hollow. I need time to think, he said finally. Time is something you don't have, Castellano replied. The wheels are already in motion. Your race tomorrow, the publicity around it, the interviews you gave today about living fast and dying young, it's all perfectly positioned. You have until sunrise to decide. As Dean turned back to face them, he realized that this group had given him the most terrible gift imaginable, the knowledge of his own mythologized death, and the power to choose whether to embrace it or try to escape it. But as the first hints of dawn began to creep through the windows of Stage 9, Dean made a decision that would shock everyone, including himself. He picked up the contract, looked each of them in the eye, and said the words that would determine not just his fate, but the fate of the legend that would define rebellion for generations to come. And what he chose in that moment would remain Hollywood's most closely guarded secret until now.